Well, awesome. We're joined today by Barbara Roberts, who is a playwright. But this is a recent
Yes.
to put playwright beside her name. Barbara has a very interesting life story that we're going to hear a little bit more about. But that life story certainly informs what is in this work, and we're going to hear more about. Married to a colonel and a career officer in the U.S. Air Force, 30 years in the industrial military complex, as well as the accomplishments that she certainly has her own with 2 degrees from WPI, graduate of Clark as well, mathematician. All of this then leads to this work that she has put together. Very interesting life path. And as always, you've brought us another fascinating guest.
Another great perspective. So thank you, Barbara, for joining us today. And I know you had written about that play. And before we get into that, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself? Hank just gave us a little, very mini, introduction. But I know there's a lot more interesting things that you have done in your life. If you can give us a little bit more details.
Well, thank you both for having me on. I really appreciate that, and at very short notice as well. So that's wonderful. And thanking the TV station also for broadcasting the play. So without them, I wouldn't be here, and without you, I wouldn't be here. So to talk about what I've done, I grew up in Northborough. My father's an engineer, retired. And I went to Bancroft School and then Clark University, graduated 7th in the class, went to WPI, got 2 degrees there, worked in the military industrial complex, like you said. I worked down, I think probably the insights come when your husband goes away and you're 9 months pregnant and he's not coming back for a while and he's under fire in Vietnam. And his job, part of his job was to bring back the dead from Vietnam, so that had a big effect on us. We lived in Washington, D.C. for 13 years. He worked in the Pentagon. I went to Walter Reed as a volunteer, as a wife of a colonel, to meet some of the wounded. I saw some really, really, really awful wounded people. One man sticks in my head he had a big hole in his head, about this big. Something must have hit him, and he had lost both his legs, and he was in a wheelchair. He couldn't control his legs, and his wife just dropped him. She just said, "That's it, I can't deal with it," and she divorced him. Worked a lot with people who were emotionally upset from the war as soldiers. So I come from the wife of a soldier. I see the bad aspects of war. So that's part of the reason for Standing Peace Vigil with Scott and Claire and a lot of the people here in Worcester for a number of years. And so the story actually came out of a conversation with a friend of mine, and I wanted her to take an action against the wars, to stand up against the current wars that we're in, which I don't like at all. And she said, I said, how are you going to feel when you stand before God and he asks you why you didn't do something? She said, well, I don't believe I'll stand before God. So my husband said, what if you stood before the dead? What would you say to the dead? And so therefore, that's what the play is. The play starts out in Lincoln Square, where Scott and the Catholic workers and the Quakers and the Unitarians and other people have been standing peace vigil for 21 years against all these wars, including the War on Terror. But what happens, we stand by the World War I memorial, and a man named Homer Wheaton, who died 100 years to the day that we videotaped the play, he comes out of the World War I memorial. He was a citizen of Worcester, and he died. He was a young man, and he didn't live his life. And in the play, he doesn't know that he's dead, and he thinks it's 1918, not 2018. And Scott explains to him, Scott's our leader, Scott Schaefer Duffy's our leader, and he explains to him that this is 2018 and we are protesting all these wars. And so it goes on from there, and more and more and more dead appear and complain, and there's a woman from, if you remember the little baby that was face down.
Within the Syrian.
Yes.
Yes.
And Deb, and I have to thank the cast, they were absolutely devoted. But Deb Northway, she plays that woman, and crying out for her baby, you know, do you remember my baby? And, you know, I wanted him to grow up. So the dead have a say in this play. So then what happens is somebody comes along who advocates war. He says, oh, you guys are stupid. You know, you're too idealistic. We've always fought wars. We're going to fight wars. It's a dog-eat-dog world. We've got to kill the others. Most of the Muslims, and I know you're Muslim, and most of the Muslims are bad for the most part, he says. And then finally, after that, we end up with a good man speaking, who says you have to resolve these things, otherwise the civilization is going to be destroyed. It's immoral to kill all these innocent people. And then we finally read the 34 wars the United States has been in since World War II. So,
And that was supposed to be the war to end
yes,
all wars.
and World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars. Yeah. So that's. I've done other things related to the play. I've done art shows, had speakers. I was an artist in residence at the Worcester Art Museum, especially when the Syrian war started. I was taking classes at the Worcester Art Museum, probably like 2003, and I kept drawing all these, drawing all these pictures of Muslims. And I thought, I don't know any Muslims. I got to go meet them. So my husband and I, we have a little sailboat. We shipped it to the Med, and we sailed to Turkey, and we spent 3 summers in Turkey, sailing around the coast of Turkey and meeting Muslims, and finding out that they're the most wonderful people you could ever know. I mean, so why are we going and killing people in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Mali, Chad, Syria, Lebanon? I mean, why?
So it's a remarkable life, obviously, that you are leading, and one with tremendous self-awareness. Do you regret, or does your husband regret the 30 years? Is that, were the people that you have been protesting with, are they surprised about your background? Because I guess the perception is probably, well, if you're a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, my father was a lieutenant colonel, career military officer, 30 years in as well. If you're a career officer, then somehow you would be rah-rah, let's go. I think my father probably would have liked you very, very much. So what is that perception, and did you kind of have to overcome any of that?
I think it was, for us, it was a gradual change. Your eyes slowly see what it's all about. And for him to carry back the dead, I think that was a great, I can't really speak for him. It's really hard to know what he would say, but he knows what war's all about, and he doesn't like it. I mean, I'm not against defending the country if it really needs defending.
And I guess that was sort of where I was going. That
Yes.
also that the military in and of itself is not wrong or
of course
evil,
not.
or 30 years. Obviously, there was a lot. I mean, my father loved. I don't know what I was going to say. He loved every minute of it. I'm sure. His missions were in Korea, not in Vietnam. I'm sure that he was not thrilled with those days, but. He overall had a very positive experience in the military. At the same time, I think, he also is somebody who later in life had some different worldviews.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the travel. My husband looks back on some of his old friends. He talks to them. I mean, he's still talking to them. They're good friends of his. So we're not against the military. One of the people in the play maybe explains it. In the play, there's a gunny sergeant who was in Vietnam, and he talks about his grandfather, his father, his uncles. And they were all in the military, so he joins up. This is a real conversation I had with this man. And so he made gunny sergeant, which you know is really quite an accomplishment and an honorable title. So he re-upped again after becoming, and then he got injured, ended up in the wheelchair. So I asked him, I said, you know, he lives in Worcester, I said, do you support these wars? And he said no, he didn't support these wars at all. So he thinks we should just let these people live their own lives, leave them alone, and, you know, work out ways to solve problems with them. One of my grandchildren was talking about the wars, and he said, Grandma, why? First of all, he says, Grandma, you stand peace vigil. I said, yes, and his little eyebrow went up, you know. And he said, why are we in these wars? Couldn't we just buy the oil? Wouldn't it be cheaper than fighting a war? And I said, yeah, I think so. It would be cheaper. I mean, it would also be more moral.
Yeah, you know, so you're standing vigil, as you have for all of these years in
I haven't
Lincoln
done
Square.
21
Right.
like Scott.
No, but for all of these years. And now, are you with the Catholic Workers Movement, or this is just something that you were?
I love the Catholic workers.
Yeah.
I really do. And the
But you didn't
Quakers.
come to it through the.
I didn't come
through
through the Catholic Church and the Catholic
What-
workers.
When you are standing there, and you are exercising your First Amendment right,
Yeah.
I am guessing that there are a few people who roll down their window and
Which is
are
part of the
perhaps
play.
not giving
You're giving away the play.
Oh, sorry, perhaps are not giving you all of their
Right.
support.
Yes, they use words we can't use right now. And the interesting thing is that the people, it's so much fun to stand peace vigil because they're such nice people. And when something like that happens, the guy gives you the finger and says, you know, F your grandmother, because I have a sign that says grandmothers for peace, then they all said, wow, he must have had a terrible grandmother, and we all laughed, you know. So they're supportive of each other.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, we stand out there in the cold, you know, and in the rain, if it isn't raining too hard.
Is part of the reason for the play to try and break through, though, after 21 years? Does it still have the impact, who you're getting through to, and does the play now begin to reach a new audience, hopefully?
Well, that was the idea, is to see if we could use another media to get to people. Scott explains in the play that originally 21 years ago, there were a lot of people who came out, and then the government learned
Right.
how to cover it up. But you don't show the dead people coming back in the coffins.
With the
you know.
excellent slogans they came up with.
Yes, and they got excellent slogans, try a red ribbon around the tree, et cetera, et cetera. So then it just all died off, and most people don't even understand we're in, I won't say most, that's probably not accurate. Many people don't even know we're at war. We've had people walk up to us and say, is there a war on? It's because there's so little coverage of it. And there's a raging war going on in Syria right now. If you look at Democracy Now!, you'll see all kinds of bloody bombings that are terrible.
We're so
So
polarized now
we
as a
are.
country. Has it changed over the 20 years or the number of years that you've been involved? I mean, we just seem to be so polarized now, and I'm thinking of I'm sure that from day one there was somebody who was flipping off the guy who was standing there with a peace sign and
Right.
saying, "You commie" or whatever. But has it gotten meaner? Has it gotten that there isn't as much room for a conversation in America?
Well, all I can tell you is that when we stand peace vigil every Tuesday, 4 to 5 at Lincoln Square, anybody can come. We have many placards. What I can tell you is that we're getting a lot more honks and thumbs up and waves and things like that. Most of the people drive by, I would say more than half, without even noticing us. I don't think they see us, or they're not interested. And
It's hard not to. The one where,
Well,
the one where Lisa Simpson is looking for
Right.
for the brighter American stuff. I mean, everybody's got the signs. That even when there aren't many of you. I mean, I
Oh, you've
noticed.
seen it?
Oh, sure.
Good.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I actually listened to the play.
Oh, good.
The table read. So there was one phrase that you had said which really caught my attention. In one of the conversations, someone said, "Was 9/11 your new Pearl Harbor?"
yes.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, Well, that phrase was used by the Bush administration supporters and the people behind him, that they needed a new Pearl Harbor to fight this war that they wanted to fight. And then 9/11 came along, and I've done a lot of research in it. I'm one of the 2,000 engineers who signed architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. If you look in there, my name is in there. And that was interesting that day. I signed up, and I got, within a half an hour, I got a call from California, and they wanted me to verify, indeed, that I had engineering degrees, and I had to take pictures of them and send them. Then I knew they were really honest. So I think if you honestly look at the architects and engineers, you will find out that there's a lot to the 9/11 story that is really, it really needs a new investigation.
How you explained that, I thought was really, really well done in the play. When you said, I think someone, one character said, I saw the buildings fall down like pancakes.
Yeah.
I think that phrase right there, I hadn't heard it in that manner, that metaphor, but that, I believe, may resonate with people, because things crashing doesn't necessarily mean things fall down like pancakes, like big, tall buildings.
That's right.
I mean, you don't have to be necessarily an architect or a civil engineer. I'm an engineer too, but I'm not an architect or a civil engineer. But I know enough to know that with torque and force and whatnot, things actually have to fall in certain ways, and they don't fall down like pancakes.
Yeah, so my father's 101. He's still alive and still sharp, and he lives in Ocam. And he's a retired engineer, PhD. And so I showed him Building 7, and you can look at videos on the internet of Building 7, and it crimps and then it falls just like that. And he said, "Boy, you don't need a PhD to see that this came down with explosives, that it was taken down. It was detonated and came down. It didn't pancake down like that. It just came down like you take down old buildings that you don't want anymore. And you can see them side by side. They have videos of them falling down, and then you have one that was taken down because it's no longer being used. They fall down exactly the same way."
Another part of your play that, again, caught my attention was someone saying, those Muslims, they hate our freedom.
Yes, I know. That's the line. That's Cheney's
Right.
line.
Right.
Yes.
And can you elaborate on that? I just wanted to pick your brain on that particular part.
It's back to the drawing of the Muslim women. I didn't know any, and wanting to go and find out who they were, going to Turkey and meeting people. Wonderful, wonderful people. It wasn't just the Turkish women and men. It was also people from Egypt. And when we were sailing, we met a fellow from Egypt. He liked me so much, he gave me some coral from the Red Sea, which I've never been to. We met some not Pakistani, but Palestinian women. They were just charming. We met them in Europe. I just can't, after I've met all these people, I just can't condone and keep my mouth shut about killing people who are just honest and sweet and as kind and as good as you are. I mean, we really need to find a way to build bridges between people, not bomb them. That's not the solution.
Well, do you think that the play will help build those bridges? Is that what you want to start the conversation? Because to be honest, while the two of you were talking about the conspiracy theory part, I mean, I haven't heard the whole play, so maybe I don't have the whole context. That loses me. I mean, I'm not, I'm not sure. I'm pretty skeptical on that, but I mean, I like to think that I'm willing to at least hear the play. I mean, is that what you want, the dialogue?
Well, we had a discussion about whether we would keep that in or take that out, and we voted on keeping it in. Now, we could be wrong. I don't think we are. I think if you looked at it carefully over time and thought about it, you'd probably come to the same conclusion I have. But I suppose you could make an argument that we shouldn't be in these wars even if 9/11 is what it appears to be, what the government says it is. Even
I guess that's where I was going.
Yeah.
I mean, is there?
Yes.
So there's. I mean, so what's the sort? I mean, is the overall thing that even if it even if I go, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to buy into that, or that part infuriates me, is it that at least we can still have a conversation?
Sure.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of my friends, he believes in dialogue. He teaches people how to do dialogue. And I'd like to see some of these polarized people in the United States, engage in dialogue. And we don't have to agree, to be able to have a conversation about whether we should be in these wars or not. I mean, just think of the money we just spend on it. If you want to think of it from a national point of view, all the money that goes into these wars, instead of spending it on the poor, on bridges, on the environment, on whatever you need to do for the country, why don't we spend it on that instead of this other? It's far more destructive.
Like you, Hank, though, I do have to admit that I haven't done as much research either. I just remember when 9/11 happened, before anything was blamed, before we got into this war, anything, me watching the video, I actually thought the buildings were just being brought down until I saw a plane go in. And it's very hard as a citizen and as a person who believes the good in people to really wrap my head around that there could have been a conspiracy, right? I almost feel like sometimes we don't want to believe that, nor I have trouble believing it. I do understand that buildings don't look right, but at the same time, I'm not necessarily sure I want to make that step.
And I guess without it getting into a conversation about that specifically, I guess my point was especially with a play like this, there's going to be things where I'm sort of back to my whole are we so polarized as a nation? So are we so polarized that the moment somebody heard that in this interview today, they went, I'm out, and then there isn't the dialogue, or is it that at least somebody can go, oh, I don't know about that. But hey, you know what? The having the vigil and the other things that have been talked about and some of the other things in the play, some of that, okay, well, wait a minute, some of that makes sense to me. So, maybe I should get more involved in the conversation, or the next time that I'm driving through Lincoln Square, it shouldn't be just nameless faces, there they are, I've driven by them for the last decade and I have paid no attention. Maybe I'm really going to look and say, well, what's going on with these signs and what's happening here?
That's right.
And hopefully some of that will come.
I'm sitting here with an engineer who was one of the 2000 who signed,
Well, you may remember we had Richard Gage come, and he was interviewed here I was working with Beta Ashbridge, and I still do work with her. We do shows together at the Sprinkler Factory, and I get the speakers for her shows. And she did a show called Healing Fibers, and it was on war and peace. And we had Richard Gage come and speak, and he filled up the room. We had a room about this size and filled it up, and it was over at 9 o'clock. The people got up and went to the new cafe and spent 2 more hours talking to him. So I think it's worth exploring, why we're in this. You don't have to agree with me, and there's a whole lot of people who don't agree with me, but maybe overall, in terms of the wars, maybe the cause, who knows what the cause is. Maybe it's better to look at where we are.
Well, and what you said too about the awareness, I think really rings true. There's if we went up and down the street and we talked to 100 people, there would be an awful lot of people who really aren't aware.
Yes.
They just, they might be aware of the latest tweet from the president. They might be aware of what has happened with the Kardashians, but they aren't aware because, for whatever reason, we don't spend a lot of time, talking about it. Or, sad to say, I think that we have taken people like yourself who are working so hard and are so sincere. And if we had time, the resume of you and your husband and your list of incredible accomplishments should make everybody and anybody sit up, take notice, and take you very seriously. And yet people drive by and go, oh yeah, the kooks with the signs. And go on their way without ever having any serious thought about what is behind it.
Yeah, maybe they don't. As a matter of fact, that reminds me, I called Howie Carshore one time, and he was saying nobody was protesting these wars. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. And I called him up and said, well, yes, here in Worcester we are. And he denied that we were.
Don't tell me you're there. I'll tell you where you are on Tuesday at 5 o'clock.
Alternate facts, right?
That's right.
I would be very interested, and like you said, if we walked up and down the street, I'd be really interested of how many people know how many wars that you have stated that we've been in.
It was 34.
Yeah, that's shocking to
Yeah,
me. I
That's
mean,
shocking. That caught my attention
I don't know.
when
I
you
mean,
said
I was
that.
going to say,
Since World War II.
have to figure that out.
So
Right.
since World War II.
But still, 34, and I guess that they haven't all probably been declared wars, but 34 is
Well,
is
some
a
of them,
number.
like Chad, you know, that
Right.
a few months ago, we lost, what, 4 servicemen in Chad? It's like, wow, I had to go look it up where it is. You know, I knew it was in Africa somewhere.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. What's next? You know, fight the good fight. The reaction to the play, and what's next for that?
well, interestingly enough, I met a playwright, a guy who is he's had his plays put on in California and in New York City. He said he'd help me. I just contacted a woman I know who's an actress in New York and asked her. She asked me where the link was, and I sent it to her just before I got on this show right now. So I don't know where we're going. We may never, it may just die, but, oh, I have to say, one of my friends said, she said, I think your play has legs. That's Linda McCarthy, who wrote 2 of the original songs, Detainees and 100 Years. And she wrote them and sang them, and I guess Rick Quimby did some of the arrangements, but she produced 2 original songs for this particular play.
Boy. Asma, unfortunately, we are just out of time right now, just enough time for you to give us your perspective.
Well, talk about the show and the title. The guest today really has a lot of perspectives in different areas, not only as a wife of a service man, but also someone who really is involved and has seen all sides of war. And all I can suggest is please just listen to the play. We'll provide you the link, and you don't have to agree with her, as she has said, but I think being informed and being aware is the best way we can be. So I hope you do click on the link and watch and give her some feedback. So thank you for watching Perspectives.